Alright guys, so last week we talked about e-file anatomy and we talked about the handpiece, the controller unit, we talked about battery packs. This week we're going to talk about bits, which is one of my all-time favorite things to go over, and as you can see I have lots of bits. I'm what you would call a bit junkie. And believe it or not, there's actually a purpose for all of these. So before we get started, I wanted to go over our overview for the lesson as well as terminology. So today we're going to talk about types of bits, general use and care of each of the different types of bits, safety tips for you guys. Just, if this is the first time you're e-filing, or even if you've been e-filing for a while, I'm going to go over some basic safety things that you should always do and create a good habit for yourself. We're going to talk a little bit more about reviewing the RPMs and torque, because this becomes very important once we actually start filing and we start talking about bits. We're going to talk a little bit about left-handed bits. Even though I'm not left-handed, I wanted to talk about that because I often get asked from lefties. And then terminology for today, we're going to go over diamond, carbide, barrel, shaft, 3/32 of an inch. And I am going to talk about the lock chuck again today because it is important for the different bits that we use. And one thing that I forgot to put on here is also ceramic. We're going to talk about ceramic today as well. All right, so let's start with probably the most basic one. So let's start with our sanding bands. So sanding bands are very much like regular nail files, except they're on a round instead of on a nail file. So let's quickly take a look at a nail file versus a sanding band. All right, so I have some sanding bands here. I'm sure you guys have seen these. And I've also got just a regular nail file. This is a zebra nail file, but very, very similar to these sanding bands. And as you can see, they look very similar. So this is essentially the same type of material as a nail file, except it's on a round tube. I used to think that these were made of wood or carbide, but they're actually not. They're made of layers of fabric and glue, and then the abrasive is put on the outside. A lot of times on the seams is where we have problems, and so we'll talk about that as we start e-filing here. I've got a good example. So I'll show you one that has some glue. Oh, if I can focus here. There we go. So you can see that these are little tubes with the abrasive on them. You can see the sparkly abrasive, and then inside is the type of fabric that they're made of, and they're just made of layers of that. But sometimes we get these little pieces of glue that come out, and it depends on the quality of the sanding bands that you use. Also, sometimes on the corners, these little corners will flap up. So before you start using a sanding band, I always recommend, as a safety tip for sanding bands, take a quick look at the sanding band, make sure there aren't any big chunks of glue like this or corners that are flapping up. Right here I can also feel something here. Sometimes you can take care of it by filing it on another nail file and getting this off of there, or clipping it off. But I don't like to use these types of sanding bands on a client. I would look for another one that looks better, that doesn't have any glue on the seams, because that will actually feel really uncomfortable for the client once you're filing. Okay, so let me back up here again. All right, so we have our sanding bands here. Well, sanding bands have to be used with a mandrel, and I have a couple different styles of mandrels here. So this is a tension mandrel. It basically squeezes these rings down to squish them out and allows you to tighten the bit on there. And then there's also these kind that are just tension, where you push the band on and it goes onto this part of the mandrel that's a little bit fatter around, and it will hold the bit on there. So I just put my sanding band on the actual tube and I just push it down until it's secure, and then I can file with that. And you can see even there's like a little bit of a gap there. I actually like leaving a little bit of a gap. It allows me to see while I'm filing rather than having that metal right there. And again, we're going to get into this when we actually start filing with these. With a tension style, it has a little bit of like a screw top on it, so it looks just like a screw on the top of it. You can use a spatula like this to tighten it. Sometimes I'll just use my spatula if I have really long nails and I can't do this with my fingertips. I'll just use my spatula to twist that down. But essentially you want to loosen it like this. That's going to make the rings so they're not squished anymore. and then I can slide my sanding band down over the top of it, and I'm going to tighten it righty-tighty inside. And what that's going to do is it's going to compress those two rubber rings, and it'll make them squish out, and so it'll push against this. So now it's nice and secure on there, okay? Again, you don't have to put it all the way to the tip. You can if you want to, and you can push, up and down. As long as this doesn't go flying off and it's not spinning on the mandrel, you're in good shape. So those are a couple different styles of mandrels. There's lots of different styles of mandrels, but the general thing is that anytime you're using a sanding band, you've got to use some type of mandrel. And to get it off, I also push with my spatula. I like to do that. Saves my nails, and I can easily just push this out of there. Same thing with this one. Just stick your spatula in there, hold on to the sanding band, and it'll push the mandrel right out. So they should be very snug so that they're not flying off while you are working. Okay? So that is sanding bands, and sanding bands are very, very well known. You've probably seen them everywhere. And I remember the first time I got my nails done when I was 13 or 14, the nail tech used a sanding band. They do come in different grits, just like nail files do. So they usually come in fine, medium, and coarse. Medium tends to be very similar to like 180 grit nail file. Coarse tends to be about 100. And then fine, it tends to be about 220. So you can get the different coarseness for what you're doing. And these can really be used for almost anything. They can also be used left-handed or right-handed. They can be used in forward or reverse. So that's what makes them nice, is that they're very universal and they're disposable, which is also nice. But I do find these to be, they create a lot of heat while we're filing, and we'll talk about that when we actually start filing on nails. Because they are fabric, and because they use kind of a sanding motion to get product off, you'll notice that they actually create more heat than metal does. So that's one of the disadvantages of sanding bands. But one of the advantages is they're disposable, they're cheap, and you just need basically a mandrel to use them. So those are your sanding bands. All right, so let's get into a different style. So now we're going to talk about diamond bits. Diamond bits are like a metal version of a nail file on a round barrel. So they are similar to what we've been doing with nail files. They look similar, except they're made of metal instead of fabric and silicone grit. They are made by using electric current to attract and adhere small particles of metal to a metal barrel or shaft. And they come in a ton of different sizes, shapes, everything. So let's take a quick look at some examples of diamond bits. So all of these that you can see here are all diamond bits, and all of these down here are also all diamond bits. So you can see that they come in a lot of different shapes. These ones here look a little bit different. These are cross-cut diamond, and so I'll talk about that in a second. So let me just talk about some basic ones, and I'll show you also some styles that are made for different things. Okay? All right. So here's probably the most basic diamond bit that you're going to see, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see this in great detail. Okay, so it does look very similar to a nail file. So if I bring my nail file back in here, looks really, really similar, except it's metal and it's sparkly because of those metal particles, but it feels very similar to a nail file. One thing that you want to look for that you'll see as a difference when working with metal is when you first buy a metal bit, if they're not seasoned, seasoned means that they've been smoothed out and that there's no more sharp edges. If they haven't been seasoned, sometimes along this edge, while you're looking at it, you'll see little pieces of metal sticking out. So similar to like when we were talking about the glue, like this, see how I can see that sticking out on the side? Diamond bits, often you'll see little teeny tiny sparkly particles from when they are brand new. And let me see if I don't have any good examples of that. Most of my bits are already seasoned, but you'll know exactly what I mean. So it won't look nice and smooth like this. It'll actually have little teeny pieces of like grit, almost metal grit sticking out on the side. So what I do with these is I season them. So to season your bit, all you're going to do is put it in your e-file. Make sure that you twist that closed. Give it a nice little tug to make sure it's secure. And then you can turn your e-file on and forward on full speed if you want to. And then you're just going to take a nail file, and you can actually run it on a nail file like this. I like to do it right on the edge. So I actually take the edge of the bit, rub it on a nail file, and then I rub the whole belly of the bit. The belly is this whole portion right here. So right in here is I call it the belly or the barrel. The barrel is the full piece, but the belly is right about here. So we've got the tip, the belly, and then the butt per se. And so I like to run the whole bit on the nail file, and that will really help to season your new diamond bits. It does a great job of taking off any particles that might be sticking out that could be sharp. And it does not dull your bits to the point where they're unusable anymore. I do this right at the beginning, and I also disinfect all of my new bits before I use them on a client, okay? So it does a nice job of just smoothing out any of those rough particles that happen during that electric process, where basically they stick the bit in a little holder and electric current is running through it, and so it attracts the metal particles through almost a magnetic force to it and adheres it to it. And that's how you get these little diamond particles on there. And diamond actually, the diamond particles can be made of lots of different materials. There are diamond bits that are made of real diamond. There are sapphire diamond bits. There are diamond bits that are really cheap that use all kinds of materials. So the more expensive the bit, the more authentic they usually are, because they have to use the high quality materials, and they're more likely to last you longer. So that's the difference between a super, super cheap bit and a more pricey one. Diamond bits can run anywhere from $5 all the way up to $20. It just depends on what they are and what size they are. And again, depending on the material, it's going to file smoother, last longer, all of those good things, okay? So basic diamond barrel. Again, just like our sanding bands can be used in both directions, forward and reverse. They create less heat. It's funny because you would think like, oh, like metal, you know, it would be hot. It actually doesn't get hot because it doesn't absorb any heat, and also it doesn't cause as much friction as I would say a regular sanding band does. And I like the metal because it's disinfectable, it's reusable, and I just like the way that it feels better than a sanding band feels, but that's just my personal preference. Okay, so let's take a quick look at a crosscut diamond. So you can immediately see the difference. Very, very, very similar, but this one has almost like a snake print on it. And the snake print, essentially what this does is it creates grooves where air is able to go through it. Heat is able to get through it, and also product is able to get through it without getting gummed up. So if you've ever filed on, you know, gooey gel polish or gooey product with a diamond bit, this whole diamond surface will get gummed up with product. So having a cross cut with this little snake print allows these troughs in the bit to be able to have product pass through it and not get stuck onto the surface, okay? Both are made through the same process, except this one is printed and it gets kind of imprinted with that special cross cut design, and that really does help from a filing perspective. They're both smooth on the top, they're just flat on the top, and they're flat on the bottom. And we can see here this colored band. So unlike sanding bands that come in a box with fine, medium, coarse, usually the universal rule for bits, and I'll show you a couple different examples. I don't have any coarse, I don't think. Let me look if I do. Coarse is usually green or yellow. Oh, here's one. Oh, sorry, not yellow, sorry, green. My bad, don't listen to what I just said. All right, so let's look at these from finest to coarsest, okay? All right, so as a general rule, and again, these are all different types of bits. As a general rule, yellow usually means ultra fine, so you can see how smooth this thing is. They're usually just made for polishing skin, or they might come in like a ceramic or a carbide where they're ultra fine. So yellow usually means ultra fine, or sometimes it will actually have the grit printed on the top of it. And I'm just looking for one to see if I have one that's printed on the top. I don't have any of my old ones, I don't think. So on the very, very top of it, it might say XF or F or M or C or XC. So that tells you whether it's fine, extra fine, coarse, extra coarse, medium, whatever it is. Okay, so this is gonna be extra fine, fine, medium, and coarse. All right, so that's the different colors that you'll see of bands. Typically that's what's used worldwide to identify the different grits per se, or the different coarseness in bits. So this is what you'll see are these colored bands, okay? And that just kind of tells you, you know, what to expect from them. But just because this is coarse, it's also ceramic, so it's not going to feel as coarse as if it were, as if it were a carbide. All right. And there's also specialty carbides, which I'll get into in a second. Okay, so let's get back to our diamond discussion. Okay, so you can see that these bits, this one actually, the little painted band wore off, but this one is also medium. You can usually just tell by looking at them once you get used to working with bits. So blue band means medium. So I've got this crosscut texture, regular. And then you can also see that diamond bits come in lots of different shapes. So we've got spheres, we've got footballs and cones and flames and long skinny ones and all of these different styles. Okay, so all of these are diamond bits, but they're all used for different things. So here's a coarse one. Can you guys see that this one looks a little bit rougher? Can you see that? It's like a little, it's hard to see on camera, but it's a little bit rougher. You can also feel that it's rougher as well. So lots of different shapes, sizes, and they're all used for different things. Bits like these are usually used for working on the natural nail plate or around the skin. These ones are usually used for finish filing product, or you could even use a diamond barrel instead of a sanding bed to prep the natural nail, which I'll show you guys as we get into e-filing on real nails. And cones, cones can be used for everything from cleaning, you know, under the nail, cleaning also around on the product if you've got some bulk here and you want to smooth that out. Diamond is really nice because it's smooth, it files smooth. You can shave, you know, kind of sand things down without it catching on things because there's no flutes on it like there are with carbides, which we'll talk about that in just a second. So diamond is a very, very easy transition for people because they're very similar to a nail file and they don't catch on things. And that's why I really like working with diamond bits. And there's very special ones that I'll show you guys how we can do the same cuticle prep and everything that we did in our basic style video. We're going to get into that with actual bits as well. You can see also some of the ones that are different quality. So I'll just show you kind of what to look for. So you can see that sometimes with different manufacturers, they might not be as cleanly applied around the bottom. Not that this matters with a sphere because we're not using this bottom part, but you will start to see differences between manufacturers of just how nice the bit is made, you know, the differences in how they're made, and just, you know, different styles, okay? So you can kind of see the difference in the way that, you know, the shafts are made, and, you know, just the cleanness of how the grit is applied to the bit, and everything. There's also different shaft lengths. So let me just put these two balls next to each other and you can see these two are about the same length. But if you notice these two are very different, okay? So these shafts can actually be shortened. You can shave them, get them shaved off. I've actually clipped them off and shaved them off myself, although I would not recommend that for you guys. Or you can ask the manufacturer if they have different shaft lengths. The difference is when you put a long shaft into your e-file, since the shaft in your e-file is only a certain length, it's going to stick out further. It's not going to go all the way down. And again, a lot of people think that you have to shove the bit all the way into the machine until it touches here, okay? I don't like doing this. The reason why is if I go to file the nail, I'm just going to pretend if I'm filing the nail, look where my machine is hitting. So my machine is right there, and I'm trying to maneuver around the finger, and I've got my machine right there butting into the finger. So if I leave a little bit of space, okay, and depending on the length of the nail, if I leave a little bit of space, I'm able to maneuver around the nail without my e-file ever getting close or hitting the tip of the finger. So you'll see people where they'll actually have bits even, you know, this far out, depending on the length of the nail, because I need to be able to work all the way up by the cuticle. And if my nail is this long, I don't want the tip of that fingernail hitting the e-file. So that's why you'll see people pulling the bit out further so that they can work on longer nails. So this is a very short nail. You can see the whole length of the mandrel doesn't even cover, it does cover my whole entire finger. But if I had an artificial nail that was this long, it could be hitting the tip of my e-file. So that's why we stick the bit out further. And I actually prefer to stick the bit out further because I can see the bit while I'm working and I can see the difference between my bit and the machine. So that is something you can absolutely do. And that's why even if you do have bits that have a very long shaft on them, and you'll see like this one will stick out quite far, they're meant to stick out so that you can work on longer nails, and they don't need to shove all the way down into your machine, okay? All right, so let's get back to our discussion about diamond. So here, like I said, are the different types of diamond. They come in, again, all different sizes, shapes, coarseness, different styles like this, like crosscut, and they are used for lots of different things. These, like I said, can be used in either direction, so lefties and righties can use these. It doesn't matter. And we will use these for all kinds of things as we get into filing, because I think the easiest way for you guys to see what to use these for is for me to actually show you as we're doing a nail, okay? So that is our diamond section. Okay, next up are our carbides. Carbides are very different from sanding bands and diamond bands. Carbides have flutes or teeth on them. The technical term for the teeth are flutes. And the flutes are what allow us to cut and shave product. And these also come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. And I used this one in my last video, so I'll show you guys that one. So as you recall from last week, this is the one I had in my machine that you guys asked me about. This is a fine carbide cone. So you can see that the flutes are not very big. You can also see that the flutes run in kind of a V like this. They're kind of cut like this. So this allows for shaving, and it could potentially be in both directions, but I can see really close, if I show you really, really close, can you see it looks like fish scales in one direction? So can you see that all of them are reflecting like down here, okay? So all of the flutes are actually only cut in this direction, which means when my bit is spinning in forward, it's going to be shaving product. It will not shave product in reverse. So a left-handed person would need this bit in a left-handed version so that it would cut in both directions. Lots of carbides are like that, where they need to be left-handed and right-handed. Most carbides do not allow you to file in both directions. All right, so let's look at some different styles and shapes of carbides. So these are probably the more common carbide styles that you will see, especially if you have already been working with nails for a while. So these are regular carbides. They can be gold, they can be rainbow colored, like some of them have like a treatment on them that make them kind of rainbowed like this. They can be silver. Again, they might have the XF, F, M, C, whatever on top of them, or they might only have it in the container, or they might have a painted band. It just depends on the manufacturer. Carbide, like I said, can only really be used in one direction unless it specifically says that it can be used in both. But usually carbides only work in one direction. So righties will need right-handed bits, lefties will need left-handed bits. And you can see that there's different shapes. So different barrels, even different barrels have different widths. So there's large and small, there's cone. This is like a backfill bit for doing 2-week fills on French nails. There's tapered barrels like this. There's all kind. There's also safety bits, which I think I have a couple safety bits. So it's funny, they call these safety bits because they've got a rounded top on them. This one actually is a little bit different. You can see it's actually got the cuts go all the way through the top, but this one is perfectly smooth. Safety bits are a nice thing when you're first learning how to e-file, because the safety on it will actually keep you from cutting the cuticle. So this part is really nice and smooth. So if you're practicing e-filing, just having that smooth top keeps you from cutting the cuticle or cutting your skin. If you have a straight edge on the top, if you get that straight edge close, you can cause a ring of fire, or you can cut the cuticle more easily. But just because it's a safety bit doesn't mean that it is in fact safe all by itself. It really depends on how you're using this. And the safety top, you know, it is a nice starting point for people that are just starting with e-filing. I started with safety bits when I started e-filing. I think I had safety bits and literally like sanding bands were like the two things that I had, and then I got into a whole bunch of stuff, okay? So you can see the flutes or the teeth on here, the safety top on it. Again, different shaft lengths. So those are our regular carbides. And then we also have specialty carbides. So specialty carbides are similar in that they have flutes or teeth. So you can see the different types of flutes and teeth here. Let's make sure that's perfectly focused for you guys. This one is dirty. Sorry, I was using it earlier. Okay. So you can see lots of different styles of flutes on these bits. Some of them go in kind of a spiral direction, different shapes. These ones go straight up and down. These ones you can see it looks like dragon scales or snake scales, so they shave in one direction and they have more of that big coarse style, just like we saw on this guy over here. Do you remember that it looks very similar? See how you can see the kind of scale look to it? Okay, so different kind of cut to it. And then this one you can see that it's got lines going back and forth across and also up and down. So the idea with these types of bits is that you're able to shave product instead of grinding the product or sanding the product. Even these guys, the flutes are so fine, even on the coarser ones, that we're not able to just shave off product easily. The thing that I love these kind of bits for, these three are very similar. You're able to actually shave off color only and leave most of the other product untouched. So when we get into doing gel polish color changes on overlays, when we start changing colors on artificial nails, start doing fills, these bits are excellent for just removing superficial layers of product without completely taking everything down. They can be used for all different kinds of things, but I primarily use them for shaving off layers without affecting the rest of the product I have underneath. And that comes in very handy when we start doing backfills, because we don't want to take off our whole overlay. We want to leave most of this intact, only work mainly on backfilling this area and keep us a relatively smooth, perfect surface so that we can proceed with our next color, okay? This guy is also specialty carbide, but this type of specialty carbide is actually great for just taking down product. Like let's say I need to take off some acrylic nails and I need to remove most of the product before I start soaking it off. This one is excellent for that. And you can also see that there's lots of different shapes. So there's straight barrels, safety barrels. So here's just straight up and down barrels like that. And then there's also football or flame shaped bits. And the idea is, if we look at just a straight barrel, okay, so a straight barrel, if I look at it from the side, because this is what you would look at if you're filing, with a straight barrel, you can see just there, let me put my finger behind so you guys can see, okay? Can you see how just the belly of the bit is touching the center of my nail? And if I want to file this product up here by my cuticle area, I have to tip the bit up just ever so slightly so I can use that first third of my bit to get into that cuticle area. I don't want to file like this because that's going to cut a line into the nail. I just want to put it parallel to the product, parallel to the direction of the nail, so I can use that first third of the bit to shave down that product. Then I'm going to flatten out my bit as I go through the belly of the bit and also the main body of my nail. And then as I go through the tip of the nail, I tip my bit back slightly so I can use that last third or the butt of the bit on the tip of my nail. Can you guys see how I rock things back and forth? Okay. So barrel bits are very easy for people to learn how to use because they are a flat surface, much like same thing we would do with a nail file. So our nail file is flat. So if we were filing up by the cuticle area, we're going to angle our file up slightly, go through the belly of the nail and then through the tip. With football shaped bits or flame shaped bits, we're able to get even closer to the cuticle area and really focus on that area. It also has a rounded tip on it, which is nice. And because it's got that refined tip, see how tiny this area is? I can get in there with just the tip of the bit. With a barrel, you can see that it's got this squared end and I've got to get into these corners. And you can absolutely do that by coming around, but I actually really love working with flame football shaped bits because it allows me to go around rounded areas. And it also allows me to do what the barrel does, which is tip it up at the cuticle area, go through the belly of the nail, and then tip it down for the tip of the nail, okay? And you guys are gonna see that firsthand once we start filing. So specialty carbides within the carbide realm. And last but not least, we've got ceramic bits. So ceramic bits are completely in a league of their own. So ceramic is similar to carbide in that they have the same kind of fluted cut in them, but they are made of ceramic instead of metal. And ceramic has some advantages and some disadvantages. So ceramic, it does feel very smooth, especially when you're filing on gel. I do like the way that it feels. It feels like butter, but it also wears down much faster than metal. All right, so here I have some carbide bits. So these carbides, again, instead of having painted bands, these have colored plastic bands on them. So you can see this one is coarse, this one is medium, and these two are fine. Slightly different shapes on them. This one is called like a torpedo. So you can see it's very similar to a football, but it's not as tapered and it's a little bit longer. And in here, in this belly region, it's a little bit straighter. It doesn't curve quite as much here. We've got straight barrels and then, you know, safety bits as well in the ceramic range. So ceramic, they come in lots of colors. You can see this one is a black ceramic. It's actually not metal, it's black ceramic. Some companies will put little crystals in the top of them just to be cute, but like you can see how short these shafts are. And I actually don't like these particular ceramic ones that I bought. They're way too short. So look how short that shaft is. It's barely gonna fit in my e-file, depending on the e-file that you use. And this crystal here, it's just gonna hit people when I'm working with it. I also don't like this kind of stuff because it's a place for dust and debris to get stuck. And although it is kind of cute to have something sparkly on the end of it, I just think it's kind of a gimmick. So safety style, smooth on the top as well, but look how short these shafts are. So if I go to file with this, if I put it out where I want to work with it, which is here, look, it'll pull right out of my machine. So I even locked my machine and it won't stay in there because the shaft is too short. So that's why every time I put a bit in my machine, if I put it to the desired length that I want, I lock my machine until it clicks, and I always tug on the bit to make sure that that's actually secure in there, which that was not. So look, I have to put this all the way in to get it to stick in there. But what the heck, how am I supposed to file with this, with my machine right there hitting the tip of my nail? I hate working with my e-file like that. And I know I see a lot of people just shove the bit all the way down, but it really makes it harder to work with because you've got the tip of your e-file right there. And depending on how big the tip of your e-file is, some of the e-files, they're like this wide. So you can imagine how awkward that is to be trying to file on the surface of the nail. And especially if you have a long nail, you're gonna be hitting your e-file with the tip of the nail, all right? So don't be afraid to pull the bits out, but do your safety check to make sure that the bits are securely in there. Okay, so those are our 4 types of bits. So let's talk about what's a good thing to practice with, because for many of you, this is probably gonna be the first time you're seeing this, or maybe you're just getting into e-filing and you want to learn how to do things safely. So for most of you, I would recommend you start with a basic diamond barrel like this, if you can get your hands on one. We have some as well that I like working with if you guys wanna try a regular diamond barrel. Or if you want to work with just a sanding band, you can do that as well. So before I put the sanding band on, I'm just going to do a quick eyeball check, make sure there's no glue or loose corners on it. Then I can take my mandrel, put that on here. It doesn't matter which end you put first. So I'm going to shove that down there. And then righty-tighty, I can twist this. Again, if you have long nails and you don't have the dexterity to twist, you can use your spatula and then just push it down so it's right where you want it. Okay, so I like to have a teeny little lip around the edge. You don't want to have a big lip because it could actually like smush in on one end and you want it to stay perfectly round. But I do like having a teeny little lip because it just allows me to see better. I'm going to put my mandrel into my e-file. And again, I want to just take it out. For this length of a nail, I just want to take it out a little bit so that I can work with the band without touching the tip of my e-file. I'm going to lock my e-file. So on here, you can see the 2 little dots are aligned. On everyone's e-file, it's going to be different, but you should have some kind of marker that lets you know it's closed or open. And then give it a quick tug. Make sure that the sanding band is secure on the mandrel, and also make sure that your mandrel is secure in your machine. And then for most of you, start on a low speed and just get a feel for it, okay? So I'm going to have my machine on super low. You're going to be able to see it spinning on the camera. This is like ridiculously low where I could file on my hand and it doesn't do anything, all right? The biggest thing to practice with is to slow down what you're doing. I see so many people that when they're e-filing, okay, so I see like a lot of people do this. When they're e-filing, they're literally like this, e-file, like they like have no idea what the heck they're doing, okay? So what's actually happening is, just like when we hand file, we're putting the bit down, okay, and I'm doing this really slow so you guys can see. I'm putting the bit down, I come across. Okay, see how I was able to file just that section? So let me do it from the top. All right, so I put the bit down and I come across right to left. If you're a lefty, you're going to be in reverse and you're going to go left to right. So let me put it in reverse for a second. Okay, so now if this is a lefty, I'm going to start here, and you can see my bit is spinning in a different direction. I'm going to start on the left side, and I'm going to pull across to the right. Okay, so lefty, reverse for lefties, forward for righties is the general rule. So I'm on a very low speed. You can see where I've filed. So this is a good thing to practice. It's just very, very slow speed. You're not even going to be able to do anything because it's going so slow. Just practice putting the bit down and very, very lightly going across the surface of the nail, okay? So just in the middle of your nail is a great way to practice. It's going so slow, you're not even going to be able to hurt yourself with this. And the biggest thing you want to take into consideration, again, I'm going to show you guys this in next week's video, more about how to actually file. But the biggest thing is, just like with if we think about our nail file, we don't use our nail file like this. Okay, we're using it like this because we want to use that filing surface. And if we're at the cuticle area, we tip it up slightly so we can get the cuticle. If we're in the middle of the nail, we tip it straight, and then we can tip it down to do the tip of the nail, just like that. So same thing with our E-file. We can tip it up slightly. See how I can just file very, very gently right on the red, okay? Then as I come through, I can come through the whole nail like this, very nice and slow. And then when I come through the tip, I just tip my bit back ever so slightly. So it's really like this kind of movement, because this is flat and my nail is not. So I need to be able to do that, okay? So this is a great way to practice. I'm gonna have an exercise for you guys next week on how you guys can practice with your bits. And I really recommend you only practice on product first. It's very difficult to work on natural nail when you're first starting out. So just put some gel polish on or whatever. I'll show you guys an exercise next week so you can practice. And this isn't something that, you know, I think it's funny that people get so freaked out about e-filing, because honestly, I can go down to Home Depot and rent a chainsaw right now without a license or anything. E-filing is not scary as long as you're within control of the tool itself. Just like a chainsaw is very awesome and it can do lots of things, but it can also cut your leg off. E-files can't cut your leg off, so you're safe there. But you do want to take care when practicing. And as you can see, I just shaved off. I kept the general shape of my nail very, very slow, and just got a feel for putting it down lightly and coming across. So that's essentially what you're doing when you're filing. Anytime you're filing with a bit, it only files in one direction. So if I'm a righty, I have to gently, very gently, put it down on the nail and then pull it across like this, and it's going to be spinning while I'm doing that. When you see people e-filing like this, okay, I see this all the time, all over the place. I'm like, what are you doing? But if you slow down what they're doing, they're actually putting the bit down, they're coming across, and then they're picking it up and going back and coming across, and picking it up and going back and coming across, okay? The bit does not go in both directions, so you can't roll it back and forth like this on the nail. You need to come across, up, back, across, up, back, across, okay? Even if you're doing it down, same thing, down, up, back, down, up, back. You just want to be careful of this area up here, okay? So we're going to go over an awesome exercise next week for you guys to be able to practice this. And before we close out for the day, I want to go over some do's and don'ts. So one thing I wanted to talk about is that bits do wear down. Just like a sanding band is disposable, the grit gets worn down, a nail file gets worn down, all of our bits get worn down. So you do need to rotate your bits. So once you get into e-filing, you need to own more than one bit. So definitely rotate your bits. And what I mean is, what I mean is not rotate them like this, okay? Not rotate them like this. I mean have, you know, multiple of the same bit. So like here, I've got multiple of these. So for this bit, this style, I can own 3 of these guys and I can rotate through them. That way I can use this one on one client, this one on another client, this one on another client. If I use the same bit on everybody, you can imagine how quickly these are gonna get worn down, okay? So that's what I mean by rotate through your bits. Definitely disinfect your bits after each use. So I'm going to also go through how to disinfect your bits properly. I did talk about disinfection in our sanitization video and our safety video, but I'm going to show you guys how to clean your bits after we use them for the first time. So we'll get into that after next week's lesson. And also file with purpose. So just like I said, instead of going crazy fast, you know, doing what you've seen other people do, thinking that you're going to go really, really, really fast, it's just like a nail file. We have to file with purpose. We have to think about what are we trying to achieve and focus on that. And it's the same thing as when we file with a nail file. So I also want to review hand filing techniques for artificial nails once we get into shaping, because that'll really allow you to see how we can go from a regular file to a bit and do the same thing. But I always file with purpose. I don't just go fast. I don't just go through the nail. I'm always looking at what I'm doing, and I'm taking into consideration everything. And also handle your bits with care. Don't drop your bits. Don't bend them. One thing that you want to look at when you are e-filing is, I talked about putting it in, right? Locking your bit, making sure that the bit is secure inside the machine. But the other thing you want to look for, and this is actually really easy to see when you've got a longer, skinnier bit. Okay, I'm going to turn this on. So it's straight, right? I'm going to turn this on. It looks like it's spinning straight. I'm just going to go all the way at full speed, okay? So there's no blurring on the edges. It's not whipping around. So what I'm looking for, or what I want to look for, let me just zoom out a little bit here, okay? What I want to look for is the bit lassoing around or whipping around? So if I want the bit to spin perfectly straight, perfectly like around just in a circular motion, but sometimes when we bend our bit, it's going to be doing this, or it's going to be doing like this type of thing. And you'll be able to see, once you start spinning your bit, you'll start to see like a halo around the tip of it. It'll look like a cone, upside down cone. Very, very subtle sometimes, but you will be able to see it if your bit is bent. So just take into consideration that you need to check if your bit is secure in your machine, but also check right when it first starts spinning, look for any blurring around while it's spinning to see if it's bent. That means that the shaft is bent, or somewhere around here it's bent. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna whip on the nail. So it's gonna hit the nail like this, and we definitely don't want to hit the nail as we're working. So take into consideration handling your bits with care. Don't bend the shafts. Just make sure that you're very careful with this whole area, that you're not bending it, because it'll ruin your machine and it'll also potentially hurt your clients. All right, so don'ts for today. So like I just said, don't drop your bits, don't use bent bits, don't use dull bits. Dull bits, often if you are using the same bit over and over and over again and it gets worn out, what you're gonna end up doing is putting more pressure on the nail to achieve the same amount of filing, and it's gonna lead to too much heat, too much pressure, too much vibration. And even if we're just working on artificial product, we need to think about the natural nail underneath. So that is very important. Don't assume one bit will last forever. Like I said, you need to rotate your bits. Bits do wear out. A lot of you were gonna ask me probably, well, how long do they last? It really depends on the person. A bit can last anywhere from 3 to 12 months. It just depends on how often you're using it. I would say that if you're using your bits regularly, you've got 3 bits that you rotate through, you do clients 5 days a week, and you're doing, 6 clients a day, your bits are gonna wear out probably within 3 months. So you need to be replacing your bits every 3 months. If you're tinkering around at home, you can probably get away with using the same bit for a whole entire year. But I do recommend that you take that into consideration, because that's probably one of the biggest things that nail techs don't think about, or even nail aficionados or DIYers think about, is that bits wear down. And we think metal, oh, it's metal, it's never gonna wear out. It does in fact wear out, it does get dull. And if you use them a lot, you'll notice it gets dull real quick. I would say 2 to 3 months and you'll start to notice a huge difference. The other thing that can affect how long your bits last is letting them sit in disinfectant for more than the recommended amount of time. So we did talk about disinfecting our tools and our equipment and our bits in one of our past videos. Don't let your bits sit in disinfectant for longer than the recommended amount of time for your disinfectant. It will eat your bits, it will dull them faster. Metal or diamond, carbide or diamond or ceramic, it does dull them quicker. So don't let that stuff sit in there, all right? So that's all I have for you guys today this week. I am going to, again, next week, show you guys a quick exercise that you can do to practice e-filing on yourself and to learn from scratch how to do this safely. I learned how to e-file by myself watching YouTube videos before I ever took a nail class. And I will tell you that nail classes have completely upped my game. And I do recommend taking classes. Classes in person is one of the best ways that you can learn how to e-file properly. However, you can learn how to do it at home, just like anything. Just like your parents taught you how to drive a car, and we learn how to do all kinds of things on ourselves, shaving our legs for the first time. You will cut yourself, you will hurt yourself probably, but I'm gonna show you guys a safe way to learn how to do this, a step-by-step way so that you can mitigate that risk and you can fully understand what you are doing and the potential of what you are doing. Okay, so we'll get into that next week. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys next Monday. All right, bye.